want to do a bit of a survey here. Hands up, who thinks ice baths are important? Hands up. Okay, five out of eight think it's important. Now, ironically, that's probably about the population sort of perception too. If I asked a rugby team who thinks ice baths are important for them, I reckon we'd get about the same sort of numbers at hands up, probably two-thirds. Okay. I just wanted to do that because we're now going to talk about ice baths, and there's a bit of discrepancy in the benefit of them or not. Okay. So let's just talk about it. Basically, there's been research that shows a benefit to having cold water immersion for physiological adaptation. Okay, now what you'll see down here is most on the left here, most of it is endurance activities. And some of these studies I've been involved in, so I'm a bit biased, right? But essentially, if you're a highly trained cyclist, okay, and you're on your bike 60 minutes to 4 hours every day, people who jumped in cold water after sessions got fitter faster and to a higher level than those that didn't. Okay, it's as simple as that. So this idea of it interrupting physiological adaptation does not hold true. Now, everyone knows about studies that are blind and unbiased. If I gave you a cup of medicine and told you this stuff is going to make Hubert, this stuff's going to make you 10% stronger the next week, right? And if I sold it with conviction and if you believed me, you'd probably get stronger because you'd believe in this intervention, okay? Now, obviously, getting people in cold water, they know they're in cold water versus the people that weren't, who know they're doing nothing. So straight away, you've got an issue with some of the study designs, which you can't fix, other than collecting the data in a way that's it's true to the study design and randomness. So there is something there that you've got to consider. On the other side of the argument, which is, this cold water interferes with adaptations, there's a fair bit that shows that after resistance training, there seems to be some sort of blunting effect. Okay. With a lot of that research, it actually doesn't show a lot of negativity around adaptations. It just doesn't help it. Okay. So it doesn't help you get stronger. Okay. But it doesn't blunt it. It doesn't make you weaker. So that's another thing to consider when you're hearing all this stuff. There is really good research, like that research study there in 2014, that was done at the Australian Institute of Sport by highly qualified, very smart physiologists. Okay, it's not a study done in someone's backyard by some students. Okay, that's a high quality study. And so there's plenty of research that's very positive for some athletes in some sports. And likewise, there's plenty of research that sort of suggests that it doesn't help. Okay. So why do it? So here's a few studies that I suppose are positive, are for, or a bit mixed, and you'll see that there is a couple of things to consider, but we'll dig through the practicality of that soon. You've got plenty of studies that are mixed. This study I did this one 20 years ago, man. We did ice baths after. This was with Waikato NPC team. Well, I think 2004. We basically had, after every game, we had different people do different protocols for a whole season. And then we looked at how they fronted up on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, based on how many minutes they played and what recovery modality they used. This was a huge study back then because we used active cycling, we used compression, and we had nothing. So we had 4 groups after every game. And it was randomized. So everyone did something, but every week it was different. So you ended up doing 4 different exposures, and then we tracked it all and showed that active cycling and getting in water was way better than compression and doing nothing. Okay, from a muscle soreness and a bouncing back from a big game perspective come Monday, Tuesday. Okay, so if the idea is to help you turn up on Monday feeling better, then it worked after a rugby game. And of course, we're not measuring whether you're jumping higher or getting stronger or anything. We're talking about recovery to go again, which is what most team sports are looking at. How do you go again and again and again? Okay, for in football in the UK for 40 weeks. How do you play a game of football every week for 40 weeks and not get tired or sore or injured? So essentially, what my summary of the literature for you is that there's benefit in some attributes for some athletes to get in ice baths and cold water. There will be people that feel like it doesn't help them. What do we do with those people? And there'll be questions of, well, it interferes with my adaptation, or what's the purpose? So this is where your opinion and your understanding of the literature becomes really important. Like the idea of getting in an ice bath after a gym session, I don't agree with anyway, because you are looking at structural stress, you are looking at, trying to expose the body to a mechanical and metabolic load. I think that's different to an aerobic output. So again, we can look at timings in a second, but your observation is bang on, isn't it? Like if it's reducing core temp to help you, well, keep your temperature down a little bit just so you can sleep better, well, that's huge, man. Like sleep's massive. We've already talked about that. It's interesting, like have you guys personally ever experienced like having trained really, really hard on a particular day? Like I'm talking like you've buried yourself and had a really bad sleep. Have you experienced that? Yeah. I know I have. If I like sometimes if I've had a really big training day and I'll be like, man, I'm going to sleep well tonight, and then I get in bed and I have the worst sleep I've ever had. Like I think there's an element of learning there for us all. Like if you think about that, you think about the benefit of how you feel after an ice bath, or how athletes could feel after an ice bath. Forget about the heat, just the fact that if you can at least dampen some of the pain and soreness, maybe you sleep better. We do have to remember that, particularly athletes that are more experienced than others. I think if you've got experience, or you've got wisdom, or you've got the ability to make good decisions for the right reasons, like I think developing the routine, which you talk about, based on what works for you, is massively important. Now, I don't take if someone says to me, "Oh, I don't do ice baths because they don't work for me." Like, we'll talk about that in a second, but I think if you develop a routine that becomes your routine, that makes you sleep better, then happy days.